We begin our U.S. election coverage with breaking news. Billionaire Michael Bloomberg is dropping out of the Democratic presidential race, and he is endorsing former Vice President Joe Biden, according to multiple media reports. Biden captured the lion's share of delegates in Super Tuesday's primaries, including a surprising win in Texas, the biggest of the night for Biden, whose once-faltering campaign is now gaining momentum. Carolyn Presutti reports, and Richard Green narrates her report.
Voters stood in line for hours Tuesday across the so-called Lone Star State to cast their ballot for the person they wanted to take on Republican President Donald Trump in November. Ellen Shattuck was like many in her generation who voted for Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who has campaigned on promises of universal government-funded health insurance and free college.
I think Bernie has great plans for the country and for reform in D.C., and I think that that's really important instead of just going with moderate candidates that are going to continue the cycle of what we've been seeing in America for the past 200 years.
But another millennial voter, Anthony Rojas, switched his support to former Vice President Joe Biden after Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar dropped out of the race. Unlike Shattuck, Rojas says Sanders' plans are unrealistic.
Free stuff is great for our generation, but we just have to realize that's not feasible.
For older voters like Jack Leitner, health care or the cost of college wasn't the primary reason they endured the long lines on Tuesday.
Issues are not important. Policies are not important. Defeating Trump is the only thing that's important.
More than 200 delegates were up for grabs in Texas, more than any other state with the exception of California. The winner will receive the majority of the delegates, putting that candidate in a prime position to win the necessary 1,991 delegates needed to secure the Democratic nomination. For Carolyn Presutti in Dallas, Richard Green, VOA News.
Now for more on Super Tuesday and the late breaking news on Michael Bloomberg, let's go to Fort Worth, Texas, where VOA's Carolyn Presutti is standing by. Caroline, the last 24 hours has brought a wave of changes in the race to become the Democratic nominee.
Absolutely. Isn't that the truth, Esther? I can tell you a lot has changed. What a difference a day makes, right? Especially with former Vice President Joe Biden's surge. And we can attribute that to really two things. Let's go back to last Saturday. Remember, he won South Carolina really big, which showed that he can be a winner in a state. Then he came to Texas the night before Super Tuesday. He held a rally with one of his rivals, former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Then, within the hour, he went to another rally with another rival. That was current Senator from Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar. Now, both Klobuchar and Buttigieg then endorsed Biden. So a lot of their voters came over to the Biden camp, which just reinforced his votes. So you had that win in South Carolina, followed by a lot of endorsements, not only Klobuchar and Buttigieg, but a whole slew of Democratic legislators here in Texas came out for Biden.
Such a big surprise, Caroline, for Biden. But what problems might he have to tackle to be able to keep his lead?
He does have a couple issues, and the one that I noticed here was certainly he does not have the youth vote. As Richard mentioned for a bit in that report that you aired, the young people, the millennials, even those younger than the millennials, aren't coming out for him. They're coming out for Sanders, and they're saying they want reform. They want something different in the White House. They want something different than regular political activity in the White House. So that's what we're seeing now. We have seen a couple people switch from Sanders to Biden because they think that Biden can win, that he can beat President Donald Trump in November.
Now, you mentioned Sanders. Now, we know that he had taken the lead prior, but what problems do you foresee for Sanders now to be able to counter Biden's sudden surge?
That's right. In fact, both of their campaigns do have problems. Biden with the youth vote and Sanders with the African American vote. African Americans came out in full force for him here in Texas last night. So it will be difficult for him to get the African American vote. He needs to get out in that community. Biden definitely has the support. I spoke with one voter that literally took a bus to the polling station, waited in line, came out, told me he voted for Biden. He said, I would have waited as long as it would take. He said, it's important for me to get somebody in the White House who has a proven track record. He said, you know, President Barack Obama hired Joe Biden to be his vice president. And he said, I know Barack Obama has good judgment, so that's why I voted for Biden.
Texas. Carolyn, now you spoke to a number of voters there. How were they energized? What more did you hear that you can share with us?
They seem to be very energized, and they seem to be very educated voters. I didn't have any voters that said, I'm making the decision in the booth, or I just made the decision today. It seemed like they had their minds already made up. Now, except for the people that were Amy Klobuchar or Pete Buttigieg supporters, because of course then they had to switch their loyalty or else they would feel like their votes wouldn't count. Now, I can also tell you that we had a huge turnout for the vote here. 4 years ago for the Democratic primary in 2016, 1.5 million voters came out. Yesterday, more than 2 million. So certainly they had a lot. In fact, at one of the polling places where we stopped, they had to ask for more ballots and more voting machines, and it was only halfway through the day.
Wow, Caroline, great reporting. Thank you so much. VOA's Caroline Presutti reporting live from Fort Worth, Texas.